the Life and Graduation series. So my name is Valerie Moses. I'm the chair of the College of Sciences chapter for UCF Alumni. And I graduated in 2013 with my bachelor's in advertising and public relations. So I am a Nicholson grad. And then again from UCF in 2018 with my MBA. So double night, go Knights and charge on, and happy homecoming week. And on behalf of the College of Sciences board, I just want to thank all of you for attending tonight. Our board really consists of a dedicated group of College of Sciences alumni volunteers, and we strive to provide valuable networking opportunities and social events for our fellow Knights to keep you all connected on campus. And given the current situation, we know that it can be a difficult time right now, and these experiences have been held virtually, but we're looking forward to the days that we can host this series in person. We do have a really great opportunity with this series right now because we are able to go virtual. We have alumni from all over the country able to participate tonight, and you'll get to meet them in just a moment. And on behalf of the College of Sciences board, we understand the struggles that students and alumni are facing right now. And so we wanted to be there to give back in these challenging times. So through our Life After Graduation series, we're able to gather virtually to share firsthand insights from incredibly accomplished alumni in a variety of fields. So tonight's event is the second in our three-part series for the fall semester. We really hope you enjoy the event and will join us for our third event in the series for the fall, Life After Graduation, Succeeding in the Workplace, which is going to take place Monday, November 9th at 6 p.m. And you'll hear more about that at the end as well. So before we introduce our esteemed panelists, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. So this event is going to be recorded, and please mute your audio to have the best viewing experience today. Following the presentations, we're going to have a Q&A. Please drop any questions you have in the chat. And if you have any technical assistance from Zoom that you need, you can call 1-888-799-9666. So without further ado, I would like to introduce tonight's moderator. His name is Charles Richardson Gongora, and he is the chair-elect of the College of Sciences board. And he graduated from UCF 2015 with a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Chemistry. He has conducted presentations on his research and on professionalism and networking in chemistry at various seminars. After graduation, he worked in environmental chemistry for 4 years, where he increased his knowledge in instrumentation and laboratory quality assurance. Currently, he works at the Kennedy Space Center as a chemist in the component refurbishment and chemical analysis labs, analyzing fuels, gases, and other commodities used at the center. So without further ado, let's welcome Charles.
Thanks, Valerie. Hello, everybody. Greetings. Thank you for attending our seminar. Before we begin, let's introduce each of tonight's panelists. Let's start off with Andrea Pulido, who's a senior learning design specialist with Pacific Life. She graduated from UCF with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology in 2014 and a Master's in Art in Instructional Design and Technology in 2016. She began her career in defense industry before transitioning into the finance industry. Welcome, Andrea. Next, we have Ellie Siebert, who graduated with university honors from UCF in 2018, earning her bachelor's degree in advertising and public relations. During her undergrad career, she served as a team leader, avid mentor, and peer ambassador for the Burnett Honors College. Today, she is a consultant with Diversia Partners, working with venture capital firms to build the executive teams for growth stage companies such as Calm, Headspace, and Peloton. She currently serves as the vice chair for the Washington, D.C. chapter of UCF Alumni and as a Burnett Honors College alumni mentor. Welcome, Ellie. Now we have Tom Carpino, who graduated from UCF in 2016 with his bachelor's in bio. Tom is a researcher and project coordinator at ICAP, a global nonprofit which supports programs that address HIV/AIDS and related conditions and works to strengthen health systems. He is an investigator on multiple research projects ranging from HIV, COVID-19 to climate change. Tom also received his master's in biostatistics from Columbia University. Welcome to the team, Tom. And last but not least, we have Emily Karwaki, who began her research career at UCF under Dr. Anna Savage, working with amphibian disease genetics. While completing her bachelor's in biology, Emily conducted research in both emerging and well-known pathogens that are drastically reducing amphibian populations globally, attempting to understand epidemiological patterns and more easily identify pathogens in specimens and environmental samples. After earning her degree, she continued to work with the UCF biology department as an associate researcher until being offered a position with the US Geological Survey to study harmful algal blooms, or HABs, and cyanobacteria toxin genetics. She currently works with cyanotoxins, developing identification methods, determining toxin spatial and temporal patterns, and conducting field experiments looking at HAB interactions with various nutrients. She is concurrently pursuing her master's degree in nonprofit management at UCF. Welcome, Emily, and thank you all for being here this evening. Now, let's dive into our questions. Don't forget, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the group chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. So, to start off, panel, why don't you tell us about the progression from your first role out of college to where you are today? How did you get your foot in the door at your organization? Who wants to start us off?
I can get us kicked off. So I currently work as an instructional designer. I went to school to, like Charles said, to study psychology and focused in human factors. It's not a very well-known field. It's really hard to kind of get your foot in the door when it comes to kind of instructional design, instructional learning. So one of the things that I did was to pick up every opportunity that I had and try to relate some learning into it. So I started off working at the Marriage and Family Research Center, and there I kind of pitched the idea for, hey, let's have some additional seminars that I can kind of help out with and help explore that area. Later, I moved on to a Pathways internship with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and even with them was, hey, let's do some research on this, let's do some data collection, and later did my internship for my master's program at NASA, which was my first full-time experience. So pretty much as soon as I walked in, I said, hey, what can I do? I'm willing to do almost anything that you guys have available for me, even if it's external to my internship, really to get that experience and be able to leverage it. That followed me through to the defense field. And then when I made the choice to transition to my current role, it was more about positioning the skills that I had more so than the role specifically, right? So instead of saying, hey, I was an instructional designer for 5 years, it's, hey, I have 5 years of coding experience. I have 5 years of being able to do these things. And so that was more important than I've been only really an instructional designer for 3 or 4 years. Those skills kind of go a lot further. And so I think that that's kind of what's helped me put my foot in the door and kind of keep it there. This idea that we're looking more at skills and the roles themselves.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there. Thank you all for being here. It's great to virtually meet you all. As you probably noticed from my intro, my background's a little bit different from some of our other panelists. Nicholson grad, did a lot of advertising, public relations internships during my undergraduate career. And during one of my senior projects, I had to research this crisis communications case about a company. Just started really doing a lot of research on the company. Found out they actually had a job opening in their DC office, applied, and was able to really leverage all of my internship experience during undergrad to get a higher title, a higher pay raise, and also just get a job there in general, which is great. So started out at a full service marketing agency in DC, doing a lot of public relations for tech startups, getting them placements in different news articles and things like that. And then from there, just quite different than my current role today, which I really didn't go to school for. Actually got recruited to my current role where I'm working with startups directly with the venture capital firms as well. getting them funding, things like that, building out the companies, recruiting their leadership teams or CEOs, things like that. So quite different, but in my organization, getting my foot in the door where I'm at now, I would say my first month or so on the job, I sat down and got coffee. So now I guess it'd be virtual coffee dates with everyone on my team. I had a smaller team, so I was lucky enough to do that, but also reaching out to, leadership throughout different offices and things like that, and just really trying to, start building your internal brand and things like that. Straight from, your first day, just really hit the ground running. And that has worked really well for me so far.
Cool, thanks. I'll go next. Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here and share my experiences and also answer any questions that the group has. So thinking about my background and how I got my foot in the door for my first jobs. So I actually started working at a tech startup out of undergrad, which is a little bit different than the bio degree that I had. But when I was in undergrad, I was also really interested in the entrepreneurial and venture spaces. And there are a lot of really great opportunities at UCF to get that kind of engagement. So with that, I built my network, and although I didn't create my own company, I found someone that did. So that's how I got my first job. And then as I was working at that organization and kind of refined my interests for my career path, I decided to go back for my master's in public health and in biostats. And so I learned a lot of skills about data analysis and also worked with different organizations, and which is how I landed where I am today at ICAP. So when I was in grad school, I started working as a part-time student worker. And through that, I was able to meet a lot of different folks and have those connections that really allowed me, I think, to get the position that I have today at the organization. That's how I got my foot in the door. Thank you.
All right, I'll finish this up here. So happy to be here as well. As Charles said, I got my start actually at UCF. I was fortunate enough to find work with an amazing mentor, Dr. Anna Savage, and I was further fortunate that she and I got along really well, and I was able to really learn all of the skills that I needed for biology, for molecular biology, genetics, like all of the practical skills that someone would need in a lab. I was really fortunate to be able to learn there and to kind of hone those skills over the 3 or 4 years that I was working with them. And I was also able to meet a lot of the other bio department faculty, work with them occasionally. And that was actually what led me to this job with USGS. The person at USGS that hired me was actually at the bio department Christmas party because he was an adjunct faculty. And so Anna met him, a few other professors met him, and he was saying how he needed somebody who could do molecular biology and genetics and this kind of stuff. And so a few of the professors said, oh, I know someone who can do that. And they also knew that I was looking for a job. So they introduced us and we had the interview. Unfortunately, like right after we had the interview and I got offered the job, the government shut down. So I had a few months to wait before I could start, but I was still really fortunate that I was able to find this position. So for me, it was mostly that getting my foot in the door was because I was able to make those personal connections with the professors that I was working with and working for, as well as the grad students who could, like grad students can write you letters of recommendation too. So I was able to become friends with a bunch of people and make myself indispensable in the lab by offering to do any kind of work that needed to be done, to help out with whatever needed to be done whenever I could. So I think that was what really helped me get to where I am right now. Charles, I think you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. So I think what we're learning here is that the path to success is very windy. You learn a lot along the way, and as you get into new areas, you start to really hone in to where you want to be. So with that in mind, as students begin to draw near to that time when they're making their resumes, they're starting to apply. What do you think that students can do to get their resumes to the top of the pile? How do they sell themselves and really highlight those skills that employers are looking for? How about, let's go with Andrea.
So I think one of the things that you guys have to become really acquainted with is something called ATS. And so it's a system that a lot of recruiters put resumes through, and they kind of take out those resumes and pick out kind of the key buzzwords that they're looking for. Unfortunately, that's kind of how a lot of things are done today. So one of the key things that I would say for you guys is look at the positions that you're wanting to apply for and look at the keywords that they're using, look at those buzzwords, and then try to feed those into your resumes. By no means lie, because obviously you need to back up that experience, but if they're saying, in my case, instructional designer versus learning developer or something like that, those words are interchangeable. Try to use those words and tailor those resumes and those cover letters. Other things that you could do is really research the company, right? So research what their missions, their projects, what's important to them. If they talk a lot about culture, or they talk a lot about what they do in the community and things like that, or populations that they really want to help, those are things that you want to use and come prepared for, to talk about how you've put impact into those areas or how you're interested to do those things. And then the final thing I would say is get a mentor and network. So a lot of the times it's going to be a lot easier for you if you know somebody that could get that resume in for you with kind of a reference, or say, hey, a recommendation. That'll move your stuff to the top of the line, kind of like how we've heard today. So maybe it's a professor, right? Or maybe it's a friend that you went to school with, or somebody that you did an internship with. All the connections that you have at school can be leveraged for you in the future. So make sure that you treat them that way, that all those connections are important. Even if it's just, hey, I'm dropping by classroom time with a professor, you never know when you can leverage that, and definitely use that to get ahead when you're applying.
Yeah, and to that point there, so I realized after graduation I wanted to move to DC, so I found out there was an alumni Facebook page. So I posted, hello, I'm moving to DC, like, please help me. And an alum who had lived here for 10 plus years said, send me your resume. Sent it around to everyone who was relevant to me that she knew, which is great. So just really rely on that night network as well. We're everywhere, which is a great thing, but also, for me, more of a creative field is how I got my start in my professional career. So having a more creative resume to reflect that. So I think it truly can depend too on, the field you're going into. So kind of to Andrea's point, just being able to really, edit your resume to fit the kind of the needs of the company and things like that. And, not just cranking out 100 generic resumes, right? But really just make those edits that you need for it to fit to that job posting, things like that. Working with recruiting agencies is great. Having that other set of eyes, they can help you and walk you through that as well. And just to get, things to put on your resume, just interning in general, undergrad, every chance you can get, and also interning in different areas, figuring out what you're interested in. That versatility, adaptability, I think stands out a lot on your resume as well.
Yeah, I really agree with both of y'all. I think if there's one thing that I would add, depending on the field, I would recommend that you try to find out who the hiring manager is. And if there's any way to connect with them, maybe the position, it says like who the recruiter is on LinkedIn, for example, but having a conversation with someone from HR prior to even applying is super helpful, obviously depending on the context. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what all of you have said, and to the point of making those connections. So one thing that helped me a lot was actually being able to go to conferences, and right now even virtual conferences can also be helpful. But being able to go to conferences and talking to other professors or talking to other professionals in fields that I wanted to work in helped me make connections and things like that. And then in addition, so what Ellie had mentioned about, finding internships and things like that, if you have the ability to take them, absolutely do, or go after them or pursue them. And potentially, even if you don't have a ton of time or availability, sometimes professors are just happy with, or mentors are happy with whatever you can give them, whatever help you can give them. When I started working in the bio department, I actually had 2 other jobs that I was working. And so I basically just fit in my work whenever I could. So even if I was only in there for a few hours a week, it showed that I was willing to do the work, and I was willing, like, this is what I really wanted to do. So if mentors see that, a lot of times they're just really happy to see that you're really interested in the work. So definitely making friends, making those connections, and trying to make connections in the fields that you want to go into, and potentially even taking opportunities that you might not have considered. So I started doing some nonprofit work a while back, and that actually helped me get further into like the science community that I may not have drifted into before.
Okay. Okay, so we actually have a follow-up question for Andrea. If you happen to know what the name of the software that you mentioned that evaluates resumes?
Yeah, it's called ATS, and most recruiters use it.
Perfect. So I guess what we're getting from this is, research, find a mentor, cold call or cold email if you have to, take advantage of your alumni network that you'll end up having just being an alumni from UCF. So since we're on the topic of mentors, what was some great advice that any of you have received, just starting off in your field, in your career? How about Emily? Since you ended us off, why don't you start us off?
Thanks. Just work as hard as you can would be my recommendation. It's try to find a balance, certainly, but also, when you're young is the time to maybe stretch the hours a little bit if it's possible. So definitely work and make yourself invaluable to the people that you're working for.
I'm happy to hop in there. There are two pieces of advice I got that are very memorable to me. One was, right around graduation time, just about to start off my career. One of my professors in the ad PR program told me, don't compare yourself to others, especially, some of your friends in the College of Business, maybe they know their path for 6 months ahead of graduation. Your friends going to graduate school, medical, things like that, where everything is pretty much figured out and set in place. And if that's not your path, that's okay. So just don't compare yourself to others. And then the second, starting my career, first week, I was told be a sponge. Take in everything possible, shadow people, ask if you can join their meetings, even if it's just to take notes, things like that. Just take in as much as possible.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I think that one thing that was important for me is not just having a boss, but having a mentor at the organization that I was working with. So someone who can, like take you under their wing and like show you the ropes and also like understand the culture a little bit better, that have hard conversations that you can't really have with your boss and talk more about progression of your career, I think is really important. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all the kind of advice that you guys have received right now. But one of the things that I heard was to treat an interview, to learn that you're being interviewed as much as you're interviewing them. And for me, that was kind of a shock at the beginning, because it was like, hey, I'm getting out of school. Have you seen the economy? Like, I can't afford to be picky. And yet it took me a while to learn that. But now that I am kind of further in my career, it really is that opportunity, right? You really want to fit into where you're going. You want to have opportunities to learn and grow and see kind of all these different fields. So if you're not asking the right questions of them and they're not the right fit for you, chances are you're going to be looking for a new job in the future. And so that is kind of a privileged place to be. But once you find your footing, you eventually get there. So kind of in the beginning, as you're starting out, obviously you take the opportunities that come by, but as you grow and you get more comfortable, definitely keep that in mind. You kind of do have that space, that freedom to interview them as much as they interview you.
Yeah, that was actually something that was told to me as well, that, when you're in this interviewing phase, that one of the things that you can try to do is try to avoid it from being an interrogation. So, have maybe if it's just 7 questions prepared where 5 of them are about the position, but let at least 2 of them be about asking the person or people who are interviewing you a little bit about their life. Like, so how did you get into this position? What do you like about this? Or, observe what you see in their office, what they may like, or something like that. That was something that really made a difference for me. So we have another question from somebody who's asking, what are some of the first places to look, since we're talking about doing some research, first places to look for internships or just start out positions that have to do, that are more tailored to your individual major or minor? If anybody has a quick answer or.
Yeah, what I did during undergrad actually is I wasn't quite sure with my major, what I was interested in, what I really wanted to do. So I just started researching companies and their missions and, you know, just finding different organizations that I really believed in. I thought that the mayor's office sounded really cool, getting press experience. They didn't have any openings, so I emailed them and asked if they ever did to consider me. And then eventually they did, and I interned there for 6 months. So things like that, checking on the job postings on companies you're really passionate about. There is LinkedIn, but I think there is also, you know, the chance of getting lost in the crowd, especially with that, you know, that software that Andrea mentioned, things like that. Indeed is a really great place. I feel like people are pretty responsive on Indeed, Career Builder, things like that. But I think a great place to look is always the company job posting sites themselves.
I actually think USA Jobs, you might find a lot of really interesting positions that you may not knew existed. But I don't know if that was sensible. Anyway, so I don't know if Andrea or Charles, you could speak to that a little bit more, actually, since y'all, yeah.
Well, for me, one of the things that helped me out for as far as getting into Kennedy Space Center was actually being a part of the American Chemical Society, which UCF has its own chapter, and Orlando has its own chapter as well. So there are two gateways to get into that. What I proposed is what I did, which can seem a little daunting, which is look for any company or organization in that field, and you'll probably find somebody's name on Google or on LinkedIn or something like that, and you'll find their information and send them a cold email saying, hey, my name is XYZ. I'm a student at UCF studying XYZ. I wonder if I can have 15 minutes of your time, and to really talk about what it is that you do. How did you get there? What did you do to make a difference? How can I make my first few steps? And I would say 80% of the time they respond, and you have coffee dates, and you have, well, now I guess you can have virtual coffee meetups or something, but those cold messages can definitely help. How about you, Andrea, for getting into the Pathways program?
For me, it was actually a professor who recommended it. So I was talking to them and saying, hey, I have my master's internship is coming up and I need to do it somewhere. But I want to do it in a place that's relevant to me. And so a lot of instructional designers get funneled into education. And I knew that that's not where I wanted to be. That wasn't the role for me. So I really wanted to be careful about it. And so she brought up, hey, have you thought about the government? And so I went ahead and applied on USA Jobs. You can go in and you can find recent grad positions, you can find pathways, and went ahead and applied for that. And then while doing my pathways, I had to do a second internship applied to my actual position, and I couldn't find one, at which point it was actually my supervisor who recommended that I apply for a NASA one. And so I ended up doing my internship at Marshall Space Flight Center, which was amazing. So having even those opportunities, you never know who you can kind of relate to and who you can talk to. So always, I would say in my case, talk to your professors. They know a lot of things. And my professor actually, when I went back to her, she said, hey, I also did my PhD internship at, well, she did at Kennedy Space Center, but it was just kind of that mentorship and that growth. So now I can still go back to that person, but also have that experience of learning about these positions that otherwise were shut off to me. And they're not uncommon. So my husband also got a pathways position there as a poli-sci major, and now he's a full-fledged federal employee. So those things do kind of translate into jobs. It did for him, didn't necessarily for me, but it gave me a lot of experience.
Yeah, so mine was also through usajobs.gov. And I know I have a few friends who have gotten internships off of there as well. So it's not just for jobs. Like you can find temporary work or internships or something like that. Though I will say, like, the only thing there is that oftentimes for most of the positions, at least that I've seen, you do have to be a US citizen to be able to apply, unfortunately. But yeah, that was usajobs.gov was also the one that I used.
So we have another question. When is the best time to apply for a job prior to graduation so that, you know, you can quickly transition into your first position?
So I would say it depends on what sector you would like to go into. If it's government that you want to go into, personally, I don't think you can apply there's not a time too early that you can apply, because the paperwork often takes a few months. Like, I think mine took like 3 months to go through. So like 3 to 6 months prior to graduation if you're looking for a government position. If you're looking for something else, like something more towards like academia or something more towards the nonprofit realm, something like that, I would say probably like 3 months or so prior to graduation.
Yeah, so if I can add in here, I think it definitely depends on the industry. So for consulting in a lot of industry jobs, you would want to apply early, like very early, like even October, like now, for some like May, June starts. I don't know if Ellie could speak a little bit more to that, but at least that was my experience. So when I was finishing grad school, I had applied in like a fall cycle for like a summer start date, but then decided to apply for a nonprofit job around like April, and then for like a June start. So I think it definitely does depend. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say my experience is probably a little bit different, and that kind of goes back to my whole don't compare yourself advice that I got. So the head of the AdPR program had told us, you know, focus on your school, focus on your internships, your jobs, things like that, graduate, breathe, and then hit the applications. The advertising public relations world is a little different. It moves quickly. They need people now, things like that. So I applied and was in DC in 2 weeks kind of situation. I'm sure COVID now has kind of slowed that down, but I think it really depends on the industry. My job now, they hire in classes, kind of going to Thomas's point. So they're hiring now for January, February start. So it definitely depends. And I would say don't, you know, beat yourself up over it if things, especially now, are taking a bit longer than maybe you expected.
Yeah, I would have to agree with everybody else. It really depends on kind of the industry that you're in. And even within the role, so even as an instructional designer in defense, things move quickly, right? As a project starts, you need to ramp up, you need people, but in the corporate America, you might need a little bit more time. The only thing I would say is get comfortable with about a 3 to 6 month period, whenever you make a major change. So if you're going to change industries, if you're going to leave Florida and go somewhere else, like I relocated to Lincoln, Nebraska. And so whenever you make those major changes, if you don't go out there with a position, just kind of get comfortable in that space. So don't get disheartened, don't lose hope. It's normal to go through that. And now that we're going through COVID and kind of going through an economic downturn, it's normal for it to take kind of that space. Just try to take it one day at a time, and every day try to improve as much as you can. But it probably is looking about 3 to 6 months right now.
I'm glad that everybody touched upon the fact that it takes time. It's not a simple, you know, you go in, you apply, and the next day it happens. Things take time, and it's not necessarily that they don't want you, it's just your application may just take time to get to. Since we're talking about, you know, going through your network and looking for these people, how would you say, what would your advice be for students to actually build that network, to get to know those professors or those other people in professionals in the industry? How about Tom? Start us off with that one.
Okay, thanks, Charles. So I think from my perspective, LinkedIn and Twitter are good ways to do it digitally. But as far as, you know, I guess in the normal in-person world, you'd be able to make connections through classes and through clubs, which you can still do virtually. It's just a little bit harder now. But I made a lot of great connections in undergrad through various different organizations, the Honors College like Ellie, also, as I mentioned, doing various different projects with like the venture capital entrepreneurial folks. Like I think there's some really cool opportunities to expand your network at UCF. Thanks.
Yeah, the Burnett Honors College and recognized several names of other BHC alums on this Zoom, which is great to see, but has luncheons all the time, and not just BHC, all the colleges have, you know, college events and luncheons and things like that, and have amazing speakers. I know throughout my undergraduate career, we had so many people come from Department of Defense, FBI, ambassadors. We have an ambassador at our college. It's an amazing resource. So just really taking advantage of all of those events, which I'm assuming are all virtual now, but still probably being held for the most part, luckily. So just really taking advantage of all of the free events you have access to during undergrad, you know, making a great impression at your internships and getting those very solid and useful recommendation letters, and staying in touch. You know, say you had an internship your freshman year, checking in with them, you know, seeing how their life's going every year or so, and just keeping in touch with people you've met throughout your experience, I think is very helpful, because you never know when they might think of you and have you in mind for something in the future.
Okay. So since both you, oh wait, no, Emily has input.
Sorry, yeah, I was just gonna second. So Tom had mentioned Twitter. So for me, actually, Twitter was also a great way to meet scientists in particular. So for me, like it helped me branch out to scientists and other disciplines. So not just sticking with people who were studying amphibians or people who were doing molecular biology. It's reaching out to people who are doing a lot of different things from me. And that just kind of helped me make some friends in the area who could, you know, introduce me to other people and things like that. And then also, again, taking advantage of like conferences and things like that, of taking advantage of coffee hours and things like that, where any chance you have to get into contact with them. And then totally what Ellie said about, you know, talking to your professors and getting to know them and keeping into contact with them. And, you know, I mean, I have professors who I haven't taken their classes with them for 3 years now, but I still keep in touch with them. And it's just, you know, we're friends, but also like it's a useful contact to have too.
I'll be honest, I never thought of Twitter for scientists. That's a good one.
No one ever does,
Dang.
but it is surprisingly useful.
Yeah, that's really good. So we have another question coming in. Going back to, you know, choosing that right job and choosing your questions to ask during an interview, how do students find that balance between being picky and taking what you can get during this whole very competitive time, since everybody's trying to find a job, but also maintain working from home and social distancing, and there's a lot on the table now, especially for students trying to get their foot into the door. How can we find that balance between picky and taking what you can get? How about Andrea, since you started us with that being that kind of balance?
Sure. So I'll make a shameless plug for the kind of field of psychology and say that practicing kind of mindfulness and self-awareness. So kind of as you start taking roles and as you start doing things, looking at the things that are important for you, right? And that's not necessarily to say, hey, I want to work at Google because they get to play ping pong all day. But looking at professionally, what are the things that you need? And your team, do you need somebody that listens to you? Do you prefer to work alone, or do you prefer to work more in groups? Do you want to be talking to the public, or do you want to be more internal? How much creativity do you need? All of those things are going to determine kind of the role that you want to be in, the professional that you want to be in those spaces. Can you do those things? Are you comfortable? How much energy does it take? Like, I'm an introvert. So if I had to do, even though I'm in learning and development, if I had to do training all day, I would just feel exhausted. I wouldn't have any left to give afterwards. So I think it's just having a real conversation with yourself and saying, these are the things that I can't live without. And these are the things that are cool if I get them, right? So if I get the ping pong table, that's cool. But what I really want is a mentor, somebody that's going to walk me through, somebody that's willing to take a chance on me and my work. Or in my case, like my first choice was not to live in Lincoln, Nebraska, but they offered me the opportunity to run my own training department. And so that was a goal for me to do that before I was 30. And here it was a Fortune 500 company offering me that, right? But I had to look at some of the other things that were important to me too. Will I get a mentor? Will I get people that want to grow with me? And so I think that that's kind of the important part. Obviously, the paycheck is important. Like, will I be able to feed my family and pay my bills? Will I have health insurance? Things like that are critical to ask. But it is also important to ask those questions of those people interviewing you, right? How does the team dynamics work? And from a person who had a job where I came from a toxic environment, there were days I didn't even want to get up to do my favorite thing in the world, which is to be an instructional designer. And so that's not a position you ever want to be in, kind of no matter what the money is. So don't necessarily put yourself in that position if you don't have to.
So going back to, the question about finding that that specific job that kind of suits your major. I wanted to kind of circle back to Ellie, since she's been part of Burnett Honors College and has been an alumni mentor. If you may have any insight on on-campus resources that students right now can start to take advantage of before they get to that application step.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were really blessed, honestly, in the Honors College with our advising. I think that's a big part of how I got to where I am today. Shout out to Rex Roberts. He's the director of advising there. And honestly, just taking advantage of that, being able to walk into your advisor's office, make an appointment, spend some one-on-one time with them. And, going back to, I believe, Andrea's point earlier, or maybe Emily's, but just spending that time with your professors as well, even if it's not to show up and be like, do you have an internship today, but just building that relationship. I think just trying to build as many relationships as possible, like Thomas said, the different clubs and things on campus like that as well. You just, honestly, you never know who you're going to meet, and what relationship is going to lead to an internship or maybe a job. Actually, Valerie Moses, who's on this Zoom, was my alumni mentor. So now I'm an alumni mentor myself. And we had been talking online for 6 months. One day she says, hey, I have an internship I think you'd be great for. So it's just building those relationships any chance you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that Emily might be able to speak to this more, but from my experience, the Office of Undergraduate Research was fantastic and able to provide a plethora of resources to connect you with different faculty or different projects, grants, and it was how I got in touch with a lot of different faculty as well. So definitely recommend looking into the Office of Undergraduate Research, regardless of your department.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then also, if you have a meeting with a professor or something like that, something as simple as sending them a thank you note for sitting down with you. And it doesn't have to be like a physical card or something. It can just be an email saying, hey, I appreciate you taking the time out and everything to sit with me. I had actually like a really disastrous interview with my first prospective mentor and advisor at UCF. And we basically just like sat in silence for 2 minutes, and then we were like, okay, we're not a good fit, it's fine. But a week later I still sent him a thank you note and I said, yeah, thanks for sitting down with me, I appreciate you taking the time. And he was like, okay, well, that was really nice of you to do, and nobody else did that this year, so let me recommend you to someone else. And that actually helped me build the relationships with other professors and things like that really helped me out. And then I would also say definitely take advantage of the resources that are grad students. So graduate students in your department work really closely with the professors. They know a lot of it, know everything for the most part. So if you can become, friendly with them, I would say that would also definitely be a good resource to have, because they can also get you in to meetings with those professors that you want. Maybe you want to do research with them really badly, or you just want to get to know them, something like that.
Okay. So since we've brought up, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And with COVID creating a more virtually social lifestyle, how can students market themselves using these platforms, but at the same time avoid the pitfalls of it really bringing them down with, the negative outlook of social media?
I could hop in here. I would say, especially now, everything seems so casual, right? We're in each other's homes, we're in each other's bedrooms, these intimate settings. It just all seems casual. So just remembering that it's still, a professional environment. People are still going to be looking at your social media accounts. My advice is to stay private on Instagram, especially. Twitter is a different environment. It's conversational. But Instagram, staying private, being very careful about the content you're sharing, making sure it's appropriate. We had a situation in my office where someone said she was sick and didn't come in, but she had posted publicly on her Instagram story that she was in New York for the whole weekend, having the time of her life. So obviously, just being very cautious about what you're putting out there for the world to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for me, it's like that I'll do the same thing where I'll keep my Instagram account private, or I'll keep my Twitter account public or something like that. But for Twitter in particular, I have some friends who have created separate accounts for themselves. So they have like a more personal account, and then they have a more like quote unquote official account where they say, on their personal account, it's like, oh, these views are my own. This isn't meant to reflect like my work capacity or anything like that. So for me, I just have the one account, and it's just a matter of like keeping track basically, and like maybe once a week or something like that, going back and thinking like, okay, should I delete that? Was that too much? Or was that like inappropriate or too political or something like that? Maybe I should take it down. So, and then working for a government agency is a little bit different too, where it's like I worry about getting a little bit too political. So in that case, it might definitely be more beneficial to have like a separate, more personalized account. But just be mindful of what you're posting.
Yeah, I want to echo all y'all. And I think to mention also is that we can have these separate and private spaces, but the reality, and I think we all know this, but anything that we put out into the internet is open, right? It's not a closed box. So even if your account is private, but if you post some really inflammatory, derogatory, racist, whatever it is, stuff, that is going to come back to hurt you more than likely. So just be decent, I think, to each other. Like, I feel like we don't have to say it, but we do. Yeah, I think it's important to just understand that, yeah, everything is out there. Not to scare you, but it is.
I think Andrea wanted to chime in.
Sure. Yeah. So I think what everybody's saying is really important. And I think the key from it is kind of this idea of professionalism, right? So you have a brand, your brand is important. You do a lot of work to build that brand up. So make sure that you don't kind of throw it away just on simple things. The other thing that I would say is I would recommend don't limit yourself just to the platforms that you think are popular. So you don't necessarily have to limit yourself to just Twitter or Instagram or things like that. As an instructional designer, I have a website, right? So I have my own website. I do freelance, and so I put that separate from what I do for my company, but it helps me connect with other instructional designers on the internet. So if I have something like a LinkedIn profile, I could say, hey, look at something that I did currently. Or it lets me also put out a blog so that other instructional designers can look at it and kind of read about my stories and the things that I'm doing, and it's helpful for them. And I didn't even think to do that until I started seeing other instructional designers do it, people that I looked up to. So those are spaces that you can also live in. You can do YouTube, or you could do Facebook Live or things like that, where you kind of even have a pod chat, like, right, where you, sorry, pod chat is what we use in my company because we have whales. A podcast where you talk about maybe some of the struggles of like finding a job after college or things like that, where you can kind of connect with your audience. And some of those things look really good for applications later on, but also gives you a space to grow and see what other areas you're interested in and what communities out there to support you.
So as we continue talking about different things that students can do to prepare themselves for the application process, the interview process. If you were in the employer chair, the interviewer chair, what are 3 traits that you would look for like that ideal employee? Why don't we go with Ellie?
Yes, so I would say my 3 things, and things that I've heard other people get told and complimented on are just adaptability. And that also goes hand in hand with flexibility. Things don't always go as planned, right? Eagerness to learn. I think a lot of job applications out there, job postings say, oh, entry level, you need this much experience, 10 years of experience, like you needed to start working full time when you were 5 years old, basically. But I think it's really important, just that eagerness to learn and learn on the job, learn on the fly and as you go. And then be a team player. It's really important. Just being able to work well with others. I think those 3 things will take you a really long way.
Yeah, I agree too. And to add to that, also like reliability. So knowing that, this person's going to show up on time, they're going to show up when they need to show up and things like that. And also like just being able to get the projects done. So even though, like Ellie was saying, maybe you need to have, like 10, 20 years of experience or whatever for this position. But like if you have the experience and you know how to do it, you can at least get in there for a trial period and show a potential employer that, yes, I can do this work. Yes, I'm reliable, and I'll still get the job done. So definitely reliability and the adaptability for sure.
I think just one thing that I wanted to add is that it's important to be optimistic or have a positive attitude and outlook. So you can be working on projects and super stressed, but at the end of the day, like you're still working with these folks for many hours. And I think gauging in the interview, do they have like a positive, I don't know, outlook or demeanor? Do they have character? Like, you're going to be working with these people, right? So you want to have someone who you feel like you can have a connection with. So yeah, that's something I look for.
Yeah, I would say for me, it would be having a growth mindset. So the idea that, your abilities aren't capped. You're not there yet, but you can be tomorrow, and being able to acknowledge that, right? And not only that, but be able to get the feedback and kind of the measurements for yourself to see how you can grow. So being open to positive feedback from your friends and your peers and your mentors, but also being open to giving other people feedbacks, right? Being part of their learning journey as much as they are part of yours. And that comes down to culture, right? A culture of self-development and growth. And a lot of companies like to see that. And I think it speaks to a lot of the things that kind of my co-panelists said, just kind of that idea to grow. It shows that you're reliable. It shows that you want to put in the effort. It shows that you want to leave this place better than how you got in the door. And so just kind of that idea that today didn't work out, but tomorrow will be better. And how do I make that better? I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. The eagerness to learn really goes a long way. I've learned that in my first position, not technically being years of experience qualified. So that's something that is really spot on. So for our last question, what is one tip that you would give for acing the interview? Just bringing it home. How about we go with Tom?
Thanks. I think going back to what I said about being enthusiastic and having character, that's really important. Also, just, I don't know, trying to relax and understand that it's okay and you're allowed to make mistakes and ask questions and be inquisitive. So yeah, I don't know. You'll get a second chance if it doesn't go the first time around or something. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
How about Ellie?
Yes, for me, I have to prepare and write everything out. my thoughts, everything, for it to make sense for other people when they listen to it. So I would just say preparation is key. That's something that's helped me, you know, whether that's doing your research on the company, knowing what questions you would want to ask about the company and things like that. Just prepare and research.
Emily?
Yeah, and to add on to that, I'd say try and be confident. So whatever you can do to kind of like pep yourself up before you go into the interview is like, so for me, it's like maybe putting on a certain kind of lipstick or wearing a nice sweater or something like that. Like that makes me feel like, okay, I look put together. I can pretend to be put together for the next half hour or however long this interview is. So if you feel confident and walk in and be eager and be ready to engage with the person who's interviewing you. And like Tom said, you know, even know that like, even if it goes bad, you will find another opportunity and it's going to be okay. So just try and have fun as much as you can. Because the more that you show the person who's interviewing you that you understand like how to have fun and how to be an engaging person and that you really want to do this job, the more they're going to want you to be working with them.
And Andrea?
Yeah, so just to kind of borrow from everybody else, I think the most important thing for me has been to come into an interview and be your authentic self. So own who you are, right? If you're an introvert, that's okay. Own it. If you're extroverted, if you're loud, if you like to speak Spanglish, whatever it is, like just kind of own that space, because you're going to be working with these people all day, every day. And by no means am I saying go in there and not be professional or anything like that, but you could be your authentic self and you could still, I mean, I make Star Wars references almost every day. So like, it's just things like that. Like you want to be able to work with those individuals and you want to be able to bring your authentic professional self to work every day. And so again, it kind of goes back to that idea of you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. But if you can be yourself, you're more comfortable, you're more competent, you're more prepared, you're more ready to do what you have to do because you're not putting on a face and pretending to be something you're not. And I think it'll go a long way.
So yeah, I guess it's prepare, breathe, and you know, your first step is just taking that first step. So thank you all for all the panelists. I'm going to hand it over to Valerie for a few closing remarks. And thank you again.
Whoops. I think the theme for this year is definitely you're on mute. But no, I did want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and for our amazing panelists for sharing their wisdom. I know I learned a lot tonight. I think there were so many valuable takeaways. And for anybody who wants to share this with a friend who may benefit, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel, which I put in the chat. I've also linked our LinkedIn page and our Facebook group. So be sure to connect with us. We have some really fantastic programming coming up and just incredible alumni in our group. So thank you all again for coming out. Our next event will be taking place on November 9th at 6 p.m. and we are going to be talking about succeeding in the workplace. So once you've gotten the job, how do you keep the job? So thank you all again for tuning in and for participating tonight. Stay safe and charge on, and happy homecoming.